There is a moment in Hall Pass where Rick, played by Owen Wilson, sits alone in a nearly empty sports bar. The week-long freedom from his marriage, his Hall Pass, stretches before him, yet his expression is not one of anticipation, but of profound, quiet bewilderment. This is not the raucous comedy the marketing promised. It is a portrait of a man realizing the fantasy he championed might be a cage of his own making. The film arrived in 2011, a curious pivot for directors Peter and Bobby Farrelly. Known for the anarchic bodily fluid humor of Dumb and Dumber and There's Something About Mary, Hall Pass represented a maturation, or perhaps a confrontation, with their own demographic. Co-written with Pete Jones and Kevin Barnett, the project was born from a simple, provocative premise. What if married men were granted a sanctioned week off from marital fidelity? Production trivia reveals a film caught between tones. Shot primarily in Atlanta, standing in for suburban New England, the set was reportedly more subdued than typical Farrelly fare. Owen Wilson, fresh from a series of dramatic turns, brought a melancholic warmth to Rick that often clashes with the script's broader comedic set pieces. Jenna Fisher's Maggie, meanwhile, was crafted as more than a nagging wife. Fisher insisted on layers of genuine hurt and intelligence, fighting against one-dimensional portrayal. This tension is the film's core. On one level, it operates as a conventional studio comedy, complete with crude jokes about Applebee's and ill-advised seduction attempts. But beneath that surface lies a surprisingly earnest, even anxious inquiry into the psychology of middle-aged masculinity. The Hall Pass isn't just a plot device, it's a diagnostic tool, exposing the gap between adolescent fantasy and adult reality. Consider the film's visual language. The suburban scenes are shot with a flat, bright clarity, emphasizing the comfortable, if monotonous, domesticity. Contrast this with the sequences of the men on the pass. The bars and clubs are often filmed with slightly off-kilter angles and a gaugier, more artificial light. It's not an alluring escape, it's a disorienting funhouse mirror reflecting their own insecurities back at them. The central theme is the mythology of freedom. Rick and Fred, Jason Sudeikis, believe the Hall Pass will reconnect them with a lost, potent version of themselves. They speak in the language of conquest and opportunity. Yet the film systematically dismantles this mythology. Their attempts at adventure are pathetic, awkward, or morally fraught. The freedom they craved reveals itself as a terrifying emptiness. Meanwhile, the wives' subplot is often overlooked but crucial. Maggie and Grace's, Christina Applegate, trip to the beach is not just a parallel narrative, it's a counter-argument. Their experiment with freedom is nuanced, conversational, and ultimately centers on connection rather than conquest. Their storyline, while featuring its own comedic missteps, possesses an emotional authenticity that the men's journey initially lacks. The film's most insightful conflict is internal. Rick isn't battling temptation from stunning strangers. He's battling his own perception of what he should want. The fantasy woman, represented by the barista Lay, Nikki Whalen, is less a character and more an archetype, a symbol of effortless, complication-free desire. His attraction to her is purely theoretical, a symptom of his discontent, not its cure. This leads to the film's controversial, yet thematically consistent, climax. The much-discussed coffee shop bathroom scene is shocking not merely for its crudity, but for its brutal literalism. It takes the abstract fantasy of illicit sex and renders it in the most viscerally unromantic, degrading terms possible. It is the Farrellys using their signature shock humor not for a cheap laugh, but as a narrative sledgehammer to shatter the protagonist's illusion. In the aftermath, the film makes its most intimate observation. Reconciliation is not found in grand gestures, but in silent recognition. The final scenes between Rick and Maggie are devoid of the manic energy of the comedy. They are quiet, weary, and deeply felt. The resolution isn't that they rediscover passion, but that they rediscover partnership, seeing each other clearly for the first time in years. Hall Pass was met with mixed reviews, often criticized for being tonally uneven or for its crude humor. But this unevenness is perhaps its most honest feature. It mirrors the messy, contradictory experience it depicts. The clash between societal expectations of male fantasy, the comforting prison of routine, and the hard work of authentic intimacy. The film serves as an uncomfortable mirror for a specific generation. It captures the anxiety of men who grew up with one set of romantic and sexual narratives, only to find them useless in navigating long-term commitment. The comedy stems from the absurdity of applying an adolescent playbook to the complexities of adult life. Ultimately, Hall Pass is less about the morality of infidelity and more about the anatomy of discontent. It asks what happens when you get exactly what you think you want and find it hollow. The Hall Pass, therefore, becomes the best and worst thing to happen to these marriages, a destabilizing force that, by exposing the fragility of their foundations, allows for a more honest rebuilding. It remains a fascinating, flawed artifact. Not a triumphant farce, but a melancholic comedy of errors, where the biggest error is believing happiness lies in a temporary escape from the person you've built a life with. The film concludes not with a wild celebration, but with a quiet dinner, a tentative touch, and the understanding that the real adventure was the complicated, shared reality they almost left behind. Thank you for watching until the end. We pour our passion into every single video essay exploring the stories behind the movies we all love. If you stumbled upon this video by chance, there is a very high probability you might never see our channel again in your feed. So please, take a moment to hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and ring the bell. We are actively growing this community of cinema lovers, and your support is what helps us make our content better and more insightful every single day. Let's explore the magic of filmmaking together. See you in the next one.